The Israeli military has issued new evacuation orders for those living in the southern suburbs of Beirut. This comes after overnight strikes killed at least 4 people in Lebanon. Israel is fighting a second front in the war, targeting the Hezbollah militant group. The ongoing bombings have deepened the country's humanitarian crisis, with more than 800 people killed so far and over 850,000 displaced. For more on this, we can cross now to Beirut and bring in Kevin Charbel, the deputy head of mission in Lebanon for Première Urgence Internationale. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. So I want to begin with a figure here. Lebanon hosts the highest number of refugees per capita in the world, and now it's dealt with several rounds of conflict with these latest attacks by Israel on Hezbollah targets. What's the scale of the humanitarian disaster that we're currently talking about?
I mean, it's catastrophic at the moment, as you just mentioned. We're at close to 900,000 civilians displaced, 100 and so thousand living in collective shelters at the moment in terrible conditions. It includes very vulnerable categories of population, children, pregnant women, chronically ill patients, older persons. They're all living in conditions that are inhumane at the moment. The resources that are available in order to assist these people are just not adequate. And so humanitarian organizations are doing our best, but with very, very few resources. You mentioned the context. Over the past few years, Lebanon has been hit by a series of crises and conflict. And so once again, now it's compounding the civilian toll that this war is taking, as targeting seems to be expanding itself to notably civilian targets. Humanitarians are at risk. Health workers are being systematically targeted by the Israeli army, meaning that our access into those areas and our access to civilian populations are even further complicated despite the extreme vulnerabilities that they are facing right now. So we are seeing a very complicated situation on the ground. Yeah.
Now, Kevin, in these types of situations, it's not the civilians, it's not the women and the children who are starting these wars, but it does appear, unfortunately, that it's women and children that are disproportionately affected.
Yeah, as always, as you say, it seems to be civilian populations that are disproportionately affected. The type of strike pattern that we're seeing now from the Israeli side seems to also be focusing itself in dense urban areas where obviously civilian casualties are inevitable. And as I mentioned previously, we are seeing a widening targeting of civilian infrastructure and in particular healthcare networks, which means access to services is increasingly difficult for civilians. The conditions inside shelters are terrible, but there are also hundreds of thousands of people that are living outside of the shelters. You see the images on your screen in front of you. People are living on the streets, on the beach, and that's not even to mention the non-Lebanese. As you said, the country is hosting a huge number of refugees, Syrian refugees, Palestinian refugees, as well as a large migrant population. All of these groups are also under extreme stress right now, are also displaced from conflict zones, and are very much under-resourced, and we are doing our best to get to them. But again, conditions are very difficult on the ground due to the scale and the intensity of the fighting right now.
Now, Kevin, what are some of the things that your organization and other organizations operating there can do to assist children dealing with the stress of war?
I mean, as you know, children are a particularly vulnerable category of population and are always severely impacted by these kinds of conflicts. The shelters I mentioned to you that are open across the country are actually public schools. Those children have been missing school right now. Public school system is closed, so they're affected by this. They've been forcefully displaced by these forced displacement orders that are imposed on about 15 to 20% of the entire Lebanese territory, and are therefore living elsewhere to where they know in conditions that are inhumane, especially for young children who are more vulnerable than others. In other cases, children from families that have not been able to move from these forced displacement areas are now living in extremely intense conflict zones under constant threat of bombardment. And as I mentioned before, bombardment is happening inside densely populated civilian areas. So children, unfortunately, are impacted by this. I think so far, Save the Children has tabulated about 10 children are being killed per day by Israeli airstrikes on the territory.
And now, Kevin, we're not just talking about for children the risk of physical injury, but it's also mental trauma, isn't it?
It's cycle after cycle of crisis for these children. Yet again, they are forced to be displaced from their homes. And yes, absolutely, the mental trauma that is experienced by children is unavoidable at this point, given the inhumane conditions that they're being forced to go through once again. And it's something we're going to have to deal with as humanitarian organizations now on the field and psychological first aid activities, but also post-conflict, once there is a ceasefire. It's something we're going to have to deal with. It's also a question when it comes to the lack of protection of civilian space. It's something that threatens children in particular. So obviously, as PUI, we call for a respect of all parties to the conflict to respect civilian space. Unimpeded access for humanitarians to those civilians is also absolutely essential. And as you may be aware, we have been calling from day one for a ceasefire immediately.
Yes. Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us, taking time out of your day to speak with us here on France 24.